this
energy.
nicely in another.
I'm going to ask the question of what the fuck are we doing with AMRAP Olympic lifts?
Yes.
Olympic lifts done until fatigue and fatigue over. Like, why? Olympic lifting is a skill. It's a sport, yet let's do it until we're completely tired and the skill's gone out the window. With a novice lifter that went to like a learning course with a stick for one day.
Maybe
and then we loaded the bar.
Lucky.
Let's not forget the bar weighs 45 pounds. That's maybe a decent fraction of their body weight, and like you need at least 10 on there because it needs to be off the floor, right?
So that's with novice lifters. Right? We can just talk about Olympic lifts at its most basic point for a second. What's the point of Olympic lifts?
Establish power.
Yeah. Establish power, right? So yes, we can establish power. 2 feet positions. There's some split stance positions with the jerks and some of those.
And to be more specific, in a vertical manner.
In a very vertical manner, right? Okay, so if you look at research on this, they do develop power, but there's other things that can develop power that probably apply more to sport, and they've actually shown to be more effective than that. And the 2 things are kettlebell swings is one, so that fits nicely into this episode, and number 2 is jumping trap bar deadlifts. Those 2 things have been shown to produce more power, more functional translation power to sport than
with less skill requirement, less risk.
Right.
Now, vertical power, yes, but you should. It starts as a hinge, which most people don't do well, so they bounce it off their thighs and go straight vertical from it. You should be able to hip hinge with power and redirect the bar vertically, which is an intense skill. Right. Which is the problem. You're asking like a very skillful movement from someone that doesn't do it well, and to do it as many times as you fucking can.
And if you're not a perfect mover and you don't have perfect skill, then you're gonna cheat.
Yeah.
If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. So you're gonna cheat. Of course, you're gonna cheat.
And there's minimal room for error because the bar is about as rigid as it gets.
That's exactly it. In my mind, it becomes a risk-reward question. Right?
I've talked to strength coaches at collegiate institutions, and they've completely eliminated the racking situation. They do the pull. Right. Awesome. Let's move to the kettlebell and either grab 1 or 2 of them. And you have the exact same thing, but with a little more volume and probably a little bit better form, with the same purpose.
I think what's cool if you're absolutely right, like using the barbell is such a fixed device. Like if you look at human movement, look at patterning, look at sport, how often are you with 2 hands overhead? Whether you're looking at the jerk or if you're looking at the snatch, that's a specific movement in that sport. But in normal sport and every other activity in the world, that's not a position of strength necessarily where you're going to be moving something or moving an object. Typically, we're going to be 1 hand overhead, pressing something. There's like if you're going to reach in your cabinet for something heavy, you're going to put 1 hand down, 1 hand up, and then reach because you got to get out. You got to open that range up. If you're throwing a baseball, throwing a javelin, spiking a volleyball, you're doing 1 hand up, 1 hand down. And this is where the kettlebell, I think, is a nice tool from a snatching standpoint, where it gives you some freedom to get it overhead, let your thoracic spine move and go. If you've got both arms overhead at the same time, whether you're pressing, snatching, jerking, you better have an amazing thoracic extension mobility and amazing mobility to that shoulder girdle.
Yeah,
right. It's the risk reward question. Like I said, it's you take this like extremely skillful movement. So you got an athlete. Your goal is force production. An Olympic lift is an option. Or maybe a jumping trap bar is an option. Kettlebell swing is an option. There's many other options out there. Do you take this thing that is a skill and a sport in and of itself and challenging and comes with its own risks, or do you take one of these other things that can produce as much, if not more, power that's less skillful and easier to coach and teach and going to accomplish the task?
I think oddly enough, I found like the best athletes usually they can't hit that overhead squat. It requires too much focus and focus on mobility. And the best athletes have some other gifts that whether it's speed or power or conditioning, and we can't expect them to kind of nail these positions. And so I think the people who are good at the lifts, they really value the sport of Olympic lifting. They don't use it as a supplement. It is the big show. And so, using a jerk for some supplemental work for athleticism is quite silly. Maybe we can kind of argue the hang clean, but then I'll argue just cleaning a kettlebell or double kettlebells any day.
Yeah. So it's the pattern. Yeah. We're not dispelling the pattern at all. You're not dispelling the snatch is good if you can do it well. The jerk, the push press, the clean, the power clean. All those things are done really, they do great things for you, but they don't have to be with the barbell. Right. And if you struggle with the barbell, stop thinking like you need to like stack boxes next to it and do partial movement patterns, or you use a training bar. Eliminate the fixed object and use some other version of it. Still practice the pattern, but you recognize there's other options out there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think to your first point about using Olympic lifts as like an AMRAP situation where we're doing this for like reps, right? I mean, the goal of Olympic lifting is power production, which really is not debatable. Like the reason why it's so popular, I think, in sports outside of its own sport, but sports such as football or track and field and throwing and such, is there's correlations. So like if you clean more and if you snatch more, you throw further and you hit people harder and you run faster. And we see that. Now we could draw those correlations with many, many other drills. And I think that's really important to take away from. You don't have to snatch more to jump higher, right? Are they correlated? Yes, to a large degree. But what's interesting is if you dive deep enough on the correlations, there's a certain level that it's kind of exponential gains where, yes, if I can, snatch 100 pounds, that's good. And 135 is way better, and 165 is way better. But at some point, 185, 200 pounds, if I was to go from 200 pounds to something ridiculous like 250 or 285, I'm not necessarily getting faster or getting better, or my jump's not getting any higher. So there's a baseline of, yes, I have a strength now to get the job done, but now getting double the improvement of my snatch no longer correlates to double the improvement of my speed. And that's so important to justify, to understand why are we doing what we're doing when we're choosing these modalities or these exercise tools, is that
diminishing returns.
Yeah, really. Are we really getting the bang for our buck we want? You got the job done. Good. Let's stay there. Let's not risk reward, to Evan's point. Why would I go so much heavier with so little benefit at that point? We've seen this in the literature. Is really well defined. So you always have to ask yourself, why are we doing what we're doing? If Olympic sport and Olympic lifting is your thing, rock and roll. But if football is your thing, then at some point Olympic lifting has a cap. Yeah. And there's some other considerations to make and other things you can do that can really improve your performance.
If you're bored, look for another tool to use.
Right.
Just skill acquisition. It's like, it's all the same pattern at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Whatever's in your hand, it's same pattern. Yeah, you can't refute it. And so if you're bored and you're like, I just want to get 400 because, that's fine to have that number, and that's your own personal choice and your opinion and whatnot, which is fully supported because it's you. But if you're going to go out there and decide what's something like it's risk versus reward and whatnot, understand that you can do the exact same thing and give back to your body in a positive way with other modes.
I think one thing that we're fighting against too, though, is that these Olympic lifts have been made kind of sexy, right? Like they're all over social media. CrossFit has become huge because of this amazing culture they've created. They've gotten a lot of people to do strength training and exercise, kind of intensely in ways that they had never done before. Mm-hmm. And so these things have been made kind of relatively cool and sexy. And so a lot of people, a lot of novices particularly, have fallen into this path because of that.
Yeah, and I think if you look at, if you were to talk to high-level Division I collegiate coaches, certainly in the pro level, you're not seeing Olympic lifts as risk reward is no longer valuable. So you don't see that at all really in that level for the most part. But in collegiate sports, you do still see it quite a bit because it's a great way to build strength on young people and develop some body fortitude. But the piece that's critical here is that if you ask a strength coach, they would never do a lift of Olympics nature for probably more than 5 reps. It'd be very, very rare to see a rep scheme higher than 5 repetitions. Most likely you're going to see like maybe a 2 to 3 repetition scheme because it's power. Yeah. And by nature of power, we're looking for absolute effort, max force, 2-3 times, shut the bar down and go rest for 5 minutes so that you can generate that again and then repeat that. We're looking for max power production. That's the whole point of the lift. How heavy of a lift body something can I get from the ground over my head in the most efficient way possible? That's Olympic lifting. When you take that and you manipulate it to like, let's do it now. How many of those can you do in a minute? How many of those can you do in 2 minutes? It completely changes the game and the stresses on the body. And it kind of loses the point of though, to your point, it is sexy and there's lots of videos on it. Is that a good goal? Is it a good goal from our perspective, from a performance standpoint? We would consider performance to be improving your movement pattern, improving your sport, improving those types of things.
What's the intention? What's the aim?
Yeah, what do we shoot
and the only intention, the only one in that scenario is to do that.
To do that.
No coach would ever say so that they could play football at a higher level, so they could play rugby at a higher level, so they could be a better athlete for X, Y, Z. It's purely just so that they can beat that number.
But that is CrossFit.
Yeah,
right?
that is what CrossFit
is. Yeah. So that is then a sport. And if you look at the highest level CrossFit athletes, they're not doing the WOD every day. They're training in other ways for that, because if they did that every single day, their body would get beat up. And that's what we see with people that.
And welcome, orthopedic surgeons, which they do quite well with the CrossFit community.
Yeah, and I think that you definitely have to be careful of like working out for time. Not to say it's bad, but you just, again, you just count what's your goal. What's the objective? What are you trying to accomplish?
I think with our brand, we condition with the skill that is absolutely owned. We almost love it with a lower scale lift, but that's why we condition with the sled. We don't condition with the most difficult lift in the world.
I don't know. I've gone completely into the category of like own the skill. I promise you, it'll give back to your life so much more than just doing things just to do them. Like do things with a purpose. It gives some excitement, some actual direction to your workouts, and then own it. And once you own it, then you can kind of get creative. You can get creative with your strength endurance. You can get creative with your aerobic and anaerobic challenges, your strength in general. I mean, you can own the skill, and the possibilities are endless. And when you do those things, those various avenues, when the skill is mastered, then it has positive effects on your body. You can only do an AMRAP of something you're moderately good at for so long before it starts taking away from you. 100%. So I like the skill acquisition by far and large. If you're in the fitness community, or if you're in the profession of training someone to do something well, like that should be your singular focus.